Ian, this broke right at the last podcast, and we talked about it was a question about the unarmed emulator being used, rearmed being used. People were like, "What? Talk about the ROMs." Well, we were getting hit with people that had no idea what our podcast was at the time, obviously, but we recorded only once every 2 weeks, so it dropped that the PS Classic were using PAL ROMs for a chunk of the games.
Yeah.
And that's, if you want to call that problematic, I would put that to a higher level than that. I would say that breaks the appeal entirely for getting this system, at least in my eyes.
Right. So the PAL games are going to... they're not going to run correctly. They're going to
There's different frame rate to begin with.
Yeah. So games like Tekken 3 are going to play miserably if you're hoping for anything close to accurate timing.
They're going to run slower.
Yeah, they're going to run slower. Yeah, the music is good. Like, if you compare... the easiest thing to do is like look up a PAL to... a 50 hertz, 60 hertz comparison of say something like Sonic the Hedgehog, which is a normally fast moving game, and you'll see the differences pretty quickly. So that's definitely a very lazy thing on their part. It just makes it seem like Sony, well, not seem like, it is. Sony was just cashing in. From announce to official launch title, or from announce to official full title list announce to release, everything just seemed to happen so fast that I almost feel like the reason why we didn't get that full list of titles right away is because there's no way they could have settled on it. I feel like they were really flying by the seat of their pants.
They wanted something out for Christmas.
Yeah. As far as half the, a good chunk of those games being PAL, I can't imagine why. I almost feel like they didn't have those files ready. I almost feel like they had.
I don't know.
Had to have pulled them.
There's also
sites.
resolution differences between PAL and North American games. So I think they compensated for that from what I read, but they didn't for like certain screen tearing. And then to make up the difference, you have to repeat frames if you're using PAL games in order to match the same 60 frames versus 50. So the whole thing's just a disaster at that point. So it's not gonna be the same experience at all. Versus the same game you played on an original PlayStation.
So here it's just looking at one of the reviews. Tekken 3, Jumping Flash, and Battle Arena Toshinden at least are based on the original PAL versions of the games. Slower, lower frame rate, and if you compare them, the PlayStation Classic ones do run more slowly. So it's they didn't even include a switching option for the 50-60 hertz, which is something that they probably could have done on that system.
People are playing this on TVs. They don't run by that system anymore anyway, but yeah, they could have at least put out a version to do that, just in case. Maybe you want to experience a slower Tekken 3 because that's what you played in Europe, but most of us, even people probably in Europe, don't want to play the slower one. They want to play the quicker one. You know what I mean?
Right.
So why do that? So the one argument I saw was like, well, maybe the what it's running on wouldn't be able to keep up with the frame rate of a Tekken 3. Maybe that's why they decided to go with the PAL.
No.
Slower. That's what I saw as I'm not saying that's right, but I just thought that could be the only thing. If it's just the fact that they were lazy, then this falls in like at games territory at this point, doesn't it? I mean, seriously.
Well, looking at some of the other things people say, the menu is drab and joyless, no display options, no borders, only one save anywhere slot per game.
So when you say there's no borders, so obviously these are in 4:3 ratio. There's no option to put anything on the sides.
Yeah.
That's something they could have programmed in a second and a half, and they decided not to do it. Just an underlay.
No save anywhere, or only one save anywhere slot per game.
Versus like a 4 on the Classic. So
yeah.
It's like, what?
Yeah.
Okay. You press the reset button on the console, go back to the menu screen. It asks you if you want to overwrite your previous save with your new position in the game. And it's easy to... So it's not... You can't even do it from the controller. You got to do it. You got to hit it, come back, and then you go through it again.
Yeah.
Okay. It says you can at least access a virtual memory card for each game where you can see your save game icons like they appeared on the original PlayStation. This is the only little nod to the past you'll find in the PlayStation Classic. Wow. Okay. So this is bare bones. They're using awful ROMs that they shouldn't be using. From the video comparisons I've seen, it doesn't run as well as an original. Just doesn't.
And I mean,
and it's still $100.
And 3/4 of the games are ones that you would play, and maybe half the games are ones you would go back to.
So this is
and I'm a Sony fan. So, I mean, I know people like to come at us as being Nintendo fanboys, but I like about half of the Nintendo systems, most portable. As far as consoles go, I actually really enjoy the later half of Nintendo consoles. I'm a Sony and Sega fan, and this has just no appeal to me. None. I don't know that I would pick one of these up at $30. And by the way, I don't have an NES Classic, and the SNES Classic is Vonnie's. So it's not like I run out to pick these up as it is. I'm not particularly interested in these mini consoles, but I did have some hopes that this would have some stuff on there that I would want. If the Japanese one got released in the US, I would maybe consider it just to have like Saga Frontier and Parasite Eve on it again. But, you know, but yeah, no, there's nothing here. And I've heard that they're sitting everywhere at stores.
Really? There's been commercials everywhere. They're advertising this like it's a new PlayStation game. There's a ton of the commercial's really cool. It like runs through the different games, and it even says like, you know, this is not the real gameplay we're showing, but they're showing like the graphics, like they're showing like King from Tekken doing a move, and they show like the race cars from it's Ridge Racer, right?
Ridge Racer 4.
Yeah. So they're showing like the commercials high tech, glossy. They're pushing this more than I've seen NES Classic and Super Nintendo Classic push. So you're saying they're still sitting. They're shitting, but they're sitting.
I think Vonnie saw a picture online that was like on Twitter that was like a bunch of them, and then I think it was Jay, the Game Chasers, posted a picture on Twitter that was like just a bunch of them sitting at Best Buy. So yeah, they definitely there was no reason for a rush or a pre-order.
Well, it also goes to show you that there isn't. I always maintain this, that there isn't this nostalgic connection to the actual systems once you get outside of like Nintendo and Sega. It kind of lessens to a degree. People probably enjoyed a few games on the classics. Oh yeah, I remember playing Final Fantasy VII in college. Doesn't necessarily need all these other games outside of those.
There's nostalgia for the PlayStation, but the problem is it's not all for Sony's games. The nostalgia for the PlayStation comes from the fact that there was tons of good games across a bunch of different genres from a ton of different companies. Wrangling a set number of games, especially 20, that's going to appeal to everyone who enjoyed the PlayStation is going to be very difficult. Sure. It's a lot easier to find 30 games that had a common that were commonly enjoyed by people on the NES.
And they didn't do 30.
No, on the NES. Okay. It's easy to find 20 common game. It's easy to find 20 games that people can agree upon that were enjoyable for the SNES. Because so many different people with so many different tastes have fond memories of the PlayStation, finding 20 games from all those different represented genres at that point that are going to appeal to everyone, that's really difficult. I mean, you also have to keep in mind, like, you know, there was a ton of different games. The landscape of games and people who played games by the time you got to the PlayStation, that's just an insurmountable task. Mm-hmm. That's very difficult.
So this is their one shot, you know. So if there's ever a PS2 classic, people are gonna have a bad taste in their mouth probably.
Well, when it comes to this, it's just you can't do it with a Source system. You're not going to be able to do it with an Xbox. You're not going. A Dreamcast, you could do it because you've got a ton of really good Sega properties to pull from. An N64 Classic, you could do it because you've got all those first-party NES.
You can still do it even though it'll be weaker than the other ones. You can still do it.
You know, and you can pull from some third parties there to do it because those systems have a solid fan base and there's a pretty good agreed-upon list of classics. There's a good agreed-upon list of classics on the PlayStation, but they span between action games, RPGs, fighting games. You'd almost need, and they'll never do it, especially at this point, and it wouldn't make sense. But you'd almost need a PlayStation Classic fighting or a PlayStation Classic RPG. You get what I'm saying? Like,
yes.
You would really need to focus in on some of these genres that were very well represented.
So, all right, well, Sony, you tried to copy Nintendo again and came up short, unfortunately.